If you were here last Sunday, you will have heard a reading from the book of Acts, which tells the story of Dorcas, a faithful follower of Jesus, and how God, acting through Peter, brought Dorcas back to life after she had died. And Dorcas's story is one of a number of small but significant details in the New Testament that bear witness to the important role that women played in the growth of the early church. Despite its setting in a very male-dominated society and an even more patriarchal religion. And this morning, at the start of Christian Aid Week, I want to introduce you to two women who, like so many other women in the developing world, play a leading role in their families and their communities as they face up to the present reality of climate change and what that means right now for their ability to feed their families. So the first person I'd like to introduce you to is Jessica. There's Jessica there in her house with some of her children. No, possibly all of her children. I'm not quite sure how many she has. But she has children. She is a loving mum. She lives in Zimbabwe, and she often fears that her family won't eat. When food is scarce, she can only give her children one bowl of porridge per day. And that's not each, that's between them. She shares her heartbreak. She says, "My children crave a decent meal, but I can't provide. It pains me to send them to bed hungry." For Jessica, drought means that every day is a struggle for survival. Like many women in Zimbabwe, she toils on her farm, but no food can grow on her ashen, dry land. She says, "One year we had no rain. The scorching sun burnt my crops just as they were about to bloom. It was so painful and disheartening." Drought robs Jessica of the power to provide for her family. She is the only breadwinner in the family because her husband is unwell. And she says, women are at the mercy of climate change and hunger. We've heard two readings from the Bible, the first of which was Psalm 148. And it's worth lingering for a few moments over the details of that. It is a great chorus of worship to our Creator. And it's striking how inclusive and how wide-ranging it is. The psalm starts by summoning praise from the highest heavens, the angels, the heavenly host, the sun, moon and stars, all the sky, both the bits we can see and the bits that we can't. And then it progresses downwards into the depths of the earth. Sea monsters, scary winds, trees, cattle, birds, and creepy crawlies are all urged to join in the shout of praise to God. And so too are human beings of all ages and genders. We can join in creation's song of praise because we are creatures like all the others. We are part of the precious gift which our Creator has given. Too often we've been tempted to set ourselves apart from or even against creation. And many of the problems facing the world today are the result of an attitude that values the earth and its non-human creatures solely in terms of their usefulness to humans. But although God has given us many special abilities, in the words of another psalm, we have been made a little lower than the angels. We are still creatures, and God's gifts are to be used by us and by all his creatures in the service of God and in good stewardship of creation. The effects of our carelessness with creation are very visible in the context of the climate crisis. And as is so often the case, those who are already suffering most from the effects of climate change are the poorest people in the world. Human recklessness and lack of care always tend to affect the poor first and hit the poor worst. And the climate crisis is no exception, which is particularly unjust when you consider that the vast majority of the emissions that are causing the problem come not from the poor world, but from rich countries like our own. In our gospel reading, Jesus lays before us a new and radical commandment. We are to love. We are to be known as his disciples, not by our doctrinal purity, not by our moral rectitude, not by our success or our power, but by the way we love one another. We are to demonstrate our love for him by loving each other. Out of the fullness of the love poured into us by God, we in turn pour out love to our sisters and brothers. And that love is a love that acts. Just as Jesus acted in love for us by enduring the cross and overcoming death, so too we are to act in love for others. So we cannot be indifferent to the suffering of people like Jessica. We are to act in solidarity with them and do what we can to enable them to enjoy all God's gifts and the same fullness of life that we have been blessed with. And each action that you and I take during this Christian Aid Week and in the weeks and months to come demonstrates our love in a practical and tangible way. For example, we can give. We can give money which will enable help women to grow crops that can survive in drought conditions. We can raise our voice for justice. One of the campaigns that Christian Aid is running at the moment is the Loss and Damage campaign, which calls on the rich world to compensate the poor for the loss and damage that we have caused by climate change. And we can pray. And we can pray for people like Jessica, pray that families will stay strong and be provided for at times of drought. Pray for the work of Christian Aid in many places. Pray that our government and other rich countries will do the right thing. The second woman that I'd like to introduce you to this morning is Janet. This is Janet with two of her great-grandchildren. She's 70. She lives in Zimbabwe like Jessica, and she has a big heart. Many of the children in her family are orphans, and she is their sole provider. She says, "In my family, children look up to me, and I must give them food, and I am more than glad to share what I have." In her village, Janet has seen how drought pushed her family into desperate hunger. One year there was so little food, rains had not fallen. We ate things that we wouldn't eat in normal times. My heart was so painful thinking that my family would die. But by God's grace, we did not die. We soldiered on. And with faith, hope, and love, Janet brought her family through that painful time. Thanks to the generosity of Christian Aid supporters, she was given drought-resistant seeds that can grow in the harsh climate. And her farm is now bursting with life. And she proudly shows us the food that she has grown. Bowls full of groundnuts, wild fruit, golden corn, a rainbow of colour. And now she is strong and she is resilient. With all her strength, she works on her farm so her family never again go hungry. She has built a storeroom to keep her harvest safe and secure, to help her bounce back in future droughts. She knows when changes are coming and she can adapt before crisis hits. "My life is changing," she said. "This project is lifting us up. We are thankful. It makes me happy to see my family are strong and well fed." As she reflects on how her life has changed, Janet sings with joy. And as we give, act, and pray this Christian Aid Week, we rejoice with her, because when we show our love in action, it really makes a difference.